So before we get started, I just want to remind all of those folks that are watching on the live feed and anybody here in the audience that our hashtag for Twitter is hashtag #DriveTheFuture. And for the second panel, we will be taking questions on Twitter. So if anybody out here has questions via Twitter, via the live feed, please go ahead and tweet that to hashtag #DriveTheFuture. To moderate our second panel, Clean Energy Innovation, we have two fantastic folks, the first of which is Tim Warman. Tim's the Vice President for Climate and Energy at the National Wildlife Federation. Tim leads the NWF's climate and energy work, and Tim has a group of policy and program specialists working on both land-based, forest and farm-based, and energy-based solutions to reduce carbon pollution, halt climate change, and advance development and use of renewable energy and energy waste reduction technologies. So thank you, Tim, for joining us today. And the second one is our friend here at the White House, Jason Miller. Jason is a Special Assistant to the President for Manufacturing Policy at the National Economic Council, and he leads the administration's efforts to coordinate policy and federal activities supporting U.S. manufacturing. He joined the Obama administration in April of 2010, and prior to joining our administration, Jason was advising global companies as a management consultant with the Boston Consulting Group. So, Jason, take it away.
Great, thanks. And I think this is going to be an excellent discussion, a good follow-up on the previous panel. You know, in the previous panel, we talked a lot about where we've been, how we got here, and a little bit about where we're going. And the focus of this discussion is really about, you know, what do the years ahead look like, and how are we positioned for innovation in the American auto industry. Now, a lot of the remarks before were about the centrality of the automobile to this country. And I think you can see that in a number of different ways, both in terms of its economic importance, but also in terms of who we are as Americans, our independence, our ingenuity, but it also highlights a lot of the challenges that different types of innovations have been trying to address, from the energy that our vehicles use and the impact on our environment, and the demands that consumers constantly have for how they interact with their vehicles going forward. I think, and I hope that this comes out in this discussion, where we're sitting right now is we're at a pretty unique moment where a confluence of consumer needs and policy needs have really enabled and put us in a position for a leap forward in terms of innovation in the American auto industry. In addition to, you know, the fuel efficiency standards that a lot of the previous panelists talked about, this administration has taken a number of different steps to try and support innovation in the auto industry, starting with major investments in the Recovery Act that included standing up a broad set of manufacturing capabilities, particularly around vehicle electrification technologies, launching new programs like ARPA-E at the Department of Energy that have funded some incredible groundbreaking technologies, one of which we'll talk about today. New programs like the EV Everywhere program at DOE that was launched last week in Detroit, that is really about getting electric vehicles to a point where they are as affordable and as convenient as current internal combustion engine vehicles, and a broad set of policies that we proposed across a number of different technology areas. And I think that challenge is some of what I hope comes out of our discussion today. So let me start just by introducing the different panelists, and I'm going to turn over to Tim to frame some of the topics for this conversation. So I'm going to start down on my right here with Atul Kapadia. Atul is the chairman and CEO of NVIA Systems. He was the founding investor and board member of NVIA, which in partnership with Argonne National Lab received $4 million from ARPA-E in December 2009 to develop lithium-ion batteries with the highest energy density in the world. Next to Atul is Jules Chiraya, the program manager for the Center for Transportation and the Environment, Clean Cities Atlanta. Jules is a decorated U.S. Army captain with extensive experience supporting multifunctional operations. He currently serves is a project manager for the Center for Transportation and the Environment, Clean Cities Atlanta, and the City of Atlanta. He is leading the development of Atlanta's plug-in electric vehicle readiness strategy and is developing a plug-in electric vehicle readiness template for municipalities throughout the Atlanta metropolitan region to implement. His next project is to repurpose veterans to gain employment developing sustainable transportation systems in conjunction with the renewable energy market. Next is Al Ebron. Al has been the executive director of the National Alternative Fuels Training Consortium and division director for the National Research Center for Coal and Energy at West Virginia University since October 1999. Al has over 23 years of extensive experience with alternative fuel and advanced technology vehicle projects, including but not limited to biofuels, gaseous fuels, hybrid electric and electric vehicle, hydrogen, and fuel cell vehicle projects. A short list. Next is Ryan Hardy. Ryan has been manager of environmental business development at Honda since 2011. Ryan is responsible for developing environmental product and business plans across Honda's auto, motorcycle, and power equipment businesses to minimize Honda's environmental footprint while providing customers and society with innovative products. This year, Honda announced it will build its new Acura NSX sports car as a hybrid at a new plant in Central Ohio. Last but not least, Mike Gamella from UAW. Mike started at Ford Motor Company in Brook Park, Ohio as an engine assembler. He now serves as the council president for the UAW Local 1250 in Brook Park, Ohio, where Ford has invested heavily in its EcoBoost technology. EcoBoost is Ford's term for turbocharged engines that is offering in a wide variety of its vehicles. Mike said the EcoBoost engine saved Ford engine plant in 2009 when the company launched the product for specialty cars such as the Hot Rod Taurus SHO and the Lincoln MKS. So I think we have a great panel. I want to turn it over to Tim to frame the discussion.
Thank you very much, Jason. It's a great pleasure for me to be here, and I really appreciate that so many of you have taken this afternoon to really spend some time talking about and understanding our success stories. Often we don't spend enough time recognizing how and what it took to achieve success. So I am Tim Warman. I'm the Vice President for Climate and Energy at the National Wildlife Federation. And you're sitting there wondering, what is the National Wildlife Federation doing at a meeting on automobiles? So we see three major threats to wildlife. The first is the loss of habitat. The second is the fact that we're in the process of raising a generation of kids that don't go outdoors. They have no love of nature because they spend all their time in front of some kind of electric screen. And thirdly, climate change driven by the way we use energy is a major threat that is changing habitat and threatening wildlife today. The solutions to climate change will inevitably involve automobiles, transportation, how we use energy. So I'm really pleased to be here. I'm convinced that advanced vehicles, the automobile industry, innovative companies across America, American workers, they all hold that key to solving the climate and energy challenges facing us and the world. Climate and energy is not just a challenge for wildlife, by the way, it's a challenge for all of us. I grew up in the 1960s, and my first car was a 1969 Camaro. I know something about cool cars. But the coolest thing of all is that the best, the safest, the most efficient, and the most capable cars and light trucks ever made are being manufactured right now in America. As a result, we're seeing a renaissance in the automotive industry. I think that's amazing. We are living at the time where you can buy the best cars ever made. But I think even better is yet to come. Today's panel members from across the country represent innovative car companies and suppliers, cities, education and training, R&D, and labor. They have some really compelling stories to tell. Stories that will help us all see the breadth of innovation sweeping the auto industry, from fuels to infrastructure to design and globally competitive manufacturing. Innovations that are causing us to rethink the very basics of automobiles. For example, consider batteries that we've already heard a lot about. They're now fuel tanks. And electricity is a fuel. And American consumers will have better choices and more choices in the marketplace as we rethink the basics of cars. Innovation or change for change's sake is not the goal. The goal is to reap a host of benefits for consumers, for the environment, for companies, for workers, and the economy for all Americans. Our panelists will give us their unique perspectives based on their work to achieve one or more of these elements. Today, we also want to gain a better understanding of what is needed to accelerate innovation, strengthen our successes, and lead the world to a clean and safe future with improved quality of life for all. A couple of weeks ago, NWF hosted a conference where we looked at the social drivers for change. And one of the things that came out loud and clear was that people have to perceive that the change is going to lead to better quality of life, to improvements in and over the way they've done things in the past. Well, I think what we're starting to see now in automobile innovation is that consumers really do have better cars that meet all of their needs. So without any further ado, what I'd like to do is ask a question and let each of the panelists answer that question and share some of their story. So for each of you, how do you see innovation changing your industry? What's different today? And what's your role in the dynamic new automotive sector? And I don't know, we can start with you, Mike, and work our way to the right.
Thank you very much. Well, first off, the people. We don't need as many people to run a plant. To give you an example, we build the EcoBoost engine currently. It would take 5,500 people back in the 70s to get that kind of production out. At this point, we'll probably utilize between 12 and 1,400 at far better quality and a lot more efficiency, obviously. The people are a very big part of that. Where it used to be many years ago, you were just brought in, this is your job, you do this. Now you're actually a part of the process. At the point of impact, it's very important that that worker building that product understands why he or she are building that product and what the final destination of that product is. It's very important, it's critical. Understand the people who actually touch the product on the assembly lines, who machine the products, who manufacture the products, are just as important as the machinery that produces them. For many years, the corporations and the companies, they've invested a great deal in technology and machinery. They had not done that with their people. And this is a huge resource that we've missed for many, many years that currently we're finally starting to nurture. And it's starting to show. Again, if you look at the products that the auto industry is building today, it's a revitalization of the auto industry. The automobiles, the technology are so far superior to what they were a few short years back. To give you an example, the engine we'll produce in Cleveland, the EcoBoost engine, 20% more fuel efficiency, 20% more environmentally friendly. That's the type of things that we need to do in America, not to lead just this country, but the entire world. And that's what we have to get back to doing, making things, manufacturing things, and being a world leader.
Thank you. I think the story for innovation in the automobile industry today is that we have no clear idea, out beyond 2025, what kind of power plant is going to be powering our vehicles. We don't clearly know how our customers are going to be fueling them. Will it be with, advanced internal combustion engine vehicles relying on gasoline or ethanol or natural gas or advanced diesel engines? Or will it be electricity with battery electric vehicles or hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles? And so frankly, this is a very exciting time to be an automotive engineer in this industry because it's a very clear and unknown path forward. the race is on for us to meet the challenges of air quality, climate change, and energy security. And we have to do it as automobile companies by meeting the rigorous customer demands on top of fuel efficiency, of quality, safety, reliability, and performance, and doing all of that at a reasonable price such that we can continue to sell cars to customers who want them. And I mentioned there's no clear path forward as to how to do this where we can meet the needs of all of those customers. So Honda is proceeding with a kind of an all-of-the-above strategy, and it's entirely based on that kind of innovation. If I can give some concrete examples of what we're doing here. Earlier, Luke said that he believed that we could have mobility while preserving our natural world, and Honda deeply shares this belief. We have a rallying cry for the development engineers in our development centers called Blue Skies for Our Children. And this kind of sums up the essence of that. You know, every engineer in our organization wants to pass on a better world for their children. And so this is why Honda has historically been the fuel economy champion. And, but, you know, as Gary noted earlier, others have caught up, and we want to take that back within 3 years, and that takes innovation. Every other company wants to catch us. And that drives innovation and the spirit of competition in this race to do it. So in the next couple of years, Honda will unveil 4 new engines based on direct injection with variable valve timing, downsizing, a whole new set of transmissions, including CVT and dual clutch transmissions, new hybrid system, the most efficient hybrid yet, also improving aerodynamics and reducing vehicle weight, reducing vehicle rolling resistance, and applying technologies such as electric power steering, improved brakes that we were talking about in the earlier panel. But finally, new technologies that are completely unknown, like the new Fit electric vehicle that's just being unveiled this week, has the highest fuel economy of any vehicle ever tested by the US EPA, 118 miles per gallon equivalent. Now, all of that innovation results in investment and jobs. We are investing $800 million into our auto plants in the United States in order to build those new engines and build those new transmissions and build those new hybrid powertrain parts for vehicles like the new Acura ILX hybrid in the Greensburg, Indiana factory, and the natural gas Civic also at that factory. And I think that is the future of innovation in the automobile industry.
Well, thank you for the invitation to be here today. We're very excited to be here, and I'm so excited to hear all the discussion in the previous panel about training, because training never comes up first. It always comes up at the end. It should come up at the beginning, of course. Well, I direct the National Alternative Fuels Training Consortium, and we are a program of West Virginia University. And we're basically the only nationwide organization that is dedicated to promoting, supporting, and expanding the use of alternative fuel vehicles and advanced technology vehicles. Through our mission, we do a lot of things, and one of our things is to educate the country on all of these new technologies in the automotive world that's coming out. We do a lot of things at the NAFTC, but some core things we do is we develop the curriculum. We turn that curriculum into training programs, and then we also turn those activities into outreach and education programs. These are all extremely important, and we do this through a nationwide consortium of schools who are members of the consortium. We have our national training centers, which are post-secondary schools. Macomb Community College is in our consortium. That was on the previous panel. And also associate training centers, which are high schools. And it's extremely important that we go down to the high school level, which the previous panel mentioned as well. There are a lot of career opportunities for young people, and if you get them early, they have a lot of opportunities and a lot of paths to go down. And in high school, we have some programs, hopefully, that helps with that. Now, in the innovation side, the automotive industry is changing, so training has to change as quickly as it changes. Two exciting programs that we have are with the U.S. Department of Energy. And I just want to touch on those very quickly. And depending on how the panel goes, maybe talk about them more later. But we have the first was part of the ARRA funding of the entire electrification awards, and they actually carved out a major, well, not a major, but a portion of those funds for education, and we were fortunate enough to get the largest award in that area. And through that award, we are going to be developing, and are pretty well 3/4 to finishing all of this. We are going to be developing training all the way from the high school to the post-secondary schools at the community college level, the infrastructure training, and for first responder safety training, all in the areas of electric drive vehicles. So it's going to be a total package to support all of our member schools across the country and others that want to use this training to help move the electric drive industry forward with the automobile manufacturers. The second program we have is our Clean Cities Learning Program, and we work very closely with the US DOE Clean Cities Program, and we're developing training and education for their 90 to 100 coalitions across the country in the area of first responder safety training, as well as petroleum reduction technologies. And this vast array of the Clean Cities Program will then take this training and go out and, of course, do what they do is implement AFV programs all across the country. So what our program is doing is developing a lot of training for the electric drive and alternative fuel industry that is going to move out all across the country, and it's going to be up to date, and it's going to also be utilizing and dealing with the current technologies.
Thank you. Jules?
Thank you, Tim. I'd just like to thank you and the White House for this opportunity. This is amazing. It's a little bit of context for me. Back in 2009, during the State of the Union address, the President was talking about some of these initiatives we're here today talking about, except the only difference was I wasn't sitting in office figuring out how we're going to deploy advanced vehicle technologies. I was sitting in a tactical operations center in Iraq, in Wakuba. And I remember I was just like being so motivated and wanting to get home and get started. I would have never thought that we'd be here today doing what we're doing. So innovation, what's it mean? I think it means change for industry, and then in particular it represents hope for veterans that continue to be deployed overseas to secure America's oil supply chain. I know they're tired of the mission. They can't say it. I'm in the inactive reserve, so I can say it. We're tired of the mission, guys. We need to deploy these technologies and stop having to secure this oil. But anyways, what I do in Atlanta is I maintain public-private partnership that really tries to help ease this change. Because what's change mean? To an executive leader, it's great. Oh yeah, sure, I'll sign the paper, change. But to a worker, it means I have to go get training, some more skills. It's a whole bunch of extra work, but the same pay. So what the Department of Energy has done is they have provided overhead to major regions in Atlanta. We're one of the lucky recipients of one of these planning grants to essentially have extra people on hand to be able to figure out, well, how are we going to ease the deployment of these technologies in these communities? And there's multiple stakeholders. You got the property managers, the fleet managers, you got the actual governments themselves. The list goes, the electrical contractors. There's a lot of different stakeholders involved, and so a lot of times it means extra work having to go in and update these processes so we can deploy this technology, and that's really where the Department of Energy and the Obama administration have stepped up for us to be able to do the work that needs to be done. So innovation moving forward to me means change and then hope.
Thanks, Jules. Tool?
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Jason. It's a privilege for me to be here and represent the NVIA team. NVIA is a small company based in California. We were founded in 2007. It was founded by two gentlemen. One is Dr. Sujit Kumar, who's a brilliant battery scientist, and Mike Sinkula, who's a young business icon, like people hear about them in California. I was the founding investor in this company, and it's still a small company. 80% of the employees are all engineers, and about 50% of the employees are PhDs. NVIA's business is developing battery materials for the next generation. Well, today I'm here to tell you that the next generation is here, the future is here right now today. And I'll describe to you a little bit why this matters, why batteries matter, why battery materials matter. Well, if you think about it, let's look at the highest level of a metric called energy density. Energy density is the amount of energy you can encapsulate in a particular grams of material. So today, the electric cars on the road, for example, the Chevy Volt or the Nissan Leaf or the Honda Fit, have material in there or batteries in there where the energy density is about between 100 and 120 watt hour per kilogram. At 100 or 120 watt hour per kilogram, the economics simply does not work. And let me walk through some of that economics for you. If you think about an ordinary sedan on the road, it's about $25,000. And if you think about gas that is required for 6 years, it's about $18,000. I mean, take it or leave, depending on your driving habits and the price per gallon. In my calculation, which I just did here, I assumed about $3 a gallon in about 200 miles a week. So you have a total cost of ownership for 6 years to be about $43,000. 50% of the cars, 50% of the 250 million cars on the road today in America have a median life of about 7 years. So this is a fair assumption, about $43,000 total cost of ownership. And you can get 300 miles in each tank of gas that you fill. Now, if you go to an electric car, you're going to pay for a 300-mile car at least $65,000, if not more, probably $75,000. So the economics just simply doesn't work. Forget about the climate and forget about the other things. If you have a $43,000 car that's 300 miles a gallon and you pay $70,000 for an electric car for a 300-mile car, it simply does not work because, number one, you have less miles because you can't afford a 300-mile car, so you'd have to buy a shorter range car. You would have less miles, number one. Number two, it costs a lot more. And number three, you're prepaying the gas cost when you go buy the car. So these are the three reasons why electric cars are just simply not affordable. Now, let's think about the battery. What is a battery really? As somebody pointed out, a battery is a gas tank. But the chemicals that go inside the battery is the gas. And that gas can only be filled in the battery once when you make the battery. You don't keep changing the chemicals inside the battery again and again. You fill the chemicals, and then the chemicals move from anode to cathode, which are the two main components of the battery, and create electricity. And that electricity is what's going to power your car. So in this case, you're prepaying about $25,000, $30,000 for the battery cost when you buy the car, and you're getting less miles. And that's mainly because the amount of energy you can encapsulate in the chemicals is only 100 to 120 watt hour per kilogram. What NVIDIA did, NVIDIA received about $4 million from ARPA as a grant in 2009 December, and NVIDIA developed a world record energy density battery of 400 watt hour per kilogram. And this is really a moonshot in our business. Our business is the electrochemistry, material science, battery business. Why is this a moonshot? Because today's cars are about 120 watt hour per kilogram. The strongest competitors in our space that we respect a lot think that the limit of lithium-ion batteries is approximately 250 watt hour per kilograms. Well, for electric cars, NVIDIA's technology starts at 250 or 220 watt hour per kilogram, and it extends all the way to 400 watt hour per kilogram, as we demonstrated in March of 2012. Now, we didn't just show it in a small cell, and we didn't just say this is a proof of concept. We drew some graphs, and we said, tomorrow when somebody does this right, it'll actually measure to be 400 watt hour per kilogram. I wish I brought a cell here today, but we actually made automotive-grade cells and gave it to the Naval Surface Warfare Center in Crane, Indiana, and they tested our claims, and we achieved the record energy density of 400 watt hour per kilogram. Number one. Number two, the program said in 2009, you got to achieve this by December of 2011, and we did that. We achieved this by 2011, December. So what does this really mean for the auto industry? Well, I think that good news is on the horizon. I don't think that in a couple of years, we all get together again here, we'll be talking about lithium-ion batteries as a futuristic technology. And I think there's a huge leap of innovation that has happened at NVIDIA, which you will soon start seeing propagating in different vehicles around the world, in electric cars and pluggable hybrid electric cars. And I think that a 150-mile to 200-mile car for $30,000 or less is not too far in the horizon. So to summarize, NVIDIA's mission when it was founded in 2007 was to be the battery materials innovator to only do one thing, which is to make the electric car mass market real. which means a $25,000 to $30,000 car with a 150 to 200 mile range. And that's what innovation is, having the 50% of my workforce who has a PhD from the most reputed universities in the US, and making this disruptive changes in energy density is what I construe as innovation. Thanks.
So thank you to all the panelists. I asked them in advance to tell compelling stories, and I think we just heard 5 really compelling stories about what they're doing. And we started to hear some stories about where they think we might go next. But my final question for the panel, and it's, you know, cognizant of the fact that Ryan made a really good point. You know, the future, once you get out a few years, is unknown. But the future is what we're going to influence with innovation. And so I would like the panelists to take just a minute to, you know, look at the crystal ball, look at those things that give you hope. We heard about hope from a couple of the panelists here. And tell me what you would really like to see or think we will see, sort of as Atul just did. He painted an amazing story of what appeared to be an insurmountable problem and showed us how we can solve that problem in the next couple of years in a way that will make a dramatic difference for the consumer. So I'm asking each of you to take a minute or two if you want to contribute to sort of what you see in the future and what you think will be sort of really exciting in terms of outcomes from the innovations that are occurring today. Let's start back with Mike.
Well, when you talk about our future, obviously you haven't looked at the Mayan calendar. So. However, I do believe there is a future. The end of the world will come one day, but it's not going to be soon. As I tell my kids, the Mayan calendar had to end somewhere. I think that, you know, the future is very bright. But before I go any further, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't say, had it not been for Barack Obama, we would not be sitting up here today. The man literally saved the auto industry in this country. And understand, I work for Ford Motor Company. Ford was fine. We didn't need a loan. However, if that part supply would have went down, those auto parts makers would have went down with General Motors and Chrysler, we wouldn't be here having this discussion today. We'd be talking about the auto disaster instead of the auto revitalization. So I want to give credit where credit is due to the president. I know he doesn't already get it. He always get it. He's having kind of a tough time today on Capitol Hill, but he's a good man to have at the helm. That said, I think, again, the future, we have to reduce our dependence on foreign oil. It's absolutely critical, not just for the environment, but for the economy as well. The internal combustion engine has been around for 100 plus years, and when you look at the leaps and bounds that we've made in technologies, the engine just has not kept pace with that, the internal combustion engine. However, the good news now is it has, and it will. As I spoke about the EcoBoost earlier, we'll also have a 4-cylinder version of that coming out later on. I'm not at liberty to say, but there's something after that coming that'll really, you know, fuel economy-wise and as far as environmentally will be absolutely astounding. And again, I'm not at liberty to talk about that, but take my word for it, it is coming, and it will be built right in Cleveland at the Cleveland Engine Plant. When we talk about the future, as far as, you know, what's going to happen, I think the biggest thing is, again, I can't emphasize this enough, is the training of the people. We have a partnership with the Cuyahoga Community College in Cuyahoga County in the state of Ohio, and that's been really very well as far as training our people. And it's important, again, that we train people for the new technologies. But what's just as important, when we train these people, we have to have a job for them. If we train them and there's no job for them, we just wasted our money. We've got to make sure we continue manufacturing in this country. And again, we have to be a leader. We can't be a follower. We can't be concerned about China. We can't be concerned about Korea. We can't be concerned about Europe. What we have to be concerned about is the United States of America, the people in this country, and the welfare of the people in this country. Because there's a whole lot of people out there right now who don't have much hope. They don't have much hope in this country or the government or what's going on with the economy. And we've got to give these young people hope. You know, I've heard many times on this panel today, our kids are just on these video games, they're just on these computer games. Well, why is that? Because they're almost in an alternative reality because they don't want to deal with what's happening today. We have to give them hope. We have kids graduating from college right now who can't find a job. That's absolutely appalling in this country. We have to bring it back. We have to bring it home. We have to bring the jobs. We have to manufacture here. We have to produce here. We have to be the high technology leader here. That's what America's all about. Thank you.
That's a tough speech to follow.
I could try to do that as one of the younger folks on the panel. I think it's important for the younger generation to understand that we have to demonstrate and make our own value. And so I think most of the successful entrepreneurs that are out there today that are doing that. There's a lot of big vehicle manufacturers out there, and they're doing a great job, but there's also a lot of small ones. I actually met a young man about a month ago. He made an electric skateboard company. I think the Department of Transportation published a statistic that said 30% of people travel less than a mile to work and back. So why can't I take an electric skateboard? I don't need to take a car. You know what I mean? And so I would say that there are young people out there doing it today, and actually am buying that skateboard, so hopefully I can start doing that soon.
Well, I'll echo one of the things that you said out there, which is technology leadership. That's absolutely critical. And I don't think this money that we spend on claiming technology leadership is a waste. If you allow me, I'm going to cite an example from another sector, which is the Human Genome Project. The federal government invested about $3.8 billion between 1990 and 2005 in the Human Genome Project. Well, at that point of time, because of the computing power, it was estimated that it would take 15 years to get the human genome decoded. Well, I have good news for you. Today, it takes about $1,000 and 20 minutes to get it done. So, but most importantly, it has created $796 billion of economic activity over the last 15 to 20 years. And it has created 310,000 jobs just in 2010 alone. So this was a $3 billion investment or $3.8 billion investment that created an unprecedented amount of economic activity and jobs for the country. Well, the real benefits of the human genome are still not even realized. In the next 25 years, you'll see an enormous amount of cures for different diseases like cancer, etc. So these have far-reaching implications. Well, as a country, we'll just have to make a decision. Is energy important or not? I think President Obama, to give him credit, has made that decision that energy is really important, and ARPA-E was a conception of that particular priority. South Korea and China are investing, growing their R&D budgets 10% year to year, and have the largest percentage of GDP investment in energy sector. The US has been declining over the past 45, 50 years. There's a long-term decline in terms of the amount of money invested. Just taking an example from the human genome, if we can do the same kind of results, either via ARPA-E or whatever vehicle it is on the energy side, I am convinced that we won't be only identifying problems on this panel, but we'll be discussing what different electric cars and how many amount of soldiers have we saved protecting our oil, and how much dollars have we saved without exporting them to the Middle East, the oil dollars, and we'll also be discussing how much have we saved the environment in the next 10, 20 years.
If I can add, so I think the future of automobile technology will be decided by retail customers who buy these cars. We can have all the ideas we want and introduce them into the market, and if nobody buys them, it will not be a successful product. And so we have to make sure that every product that we develop will be better than the one that it replaces. When I was a university student, I led a team that designed and built a solar-powered car. And it was part of actually the DOE-sponsored project, and we drove in a race from Chicago to Los Angeles on sun power, on sunlight. And we could maintain about 45 miles per hour the entire way, so we had the entire freeway backed up behind us. And it only seated one person, and it was really big, so we had this big solar area on top. But we had this big team of people, a bunch of college engineers who were passionate about making the world a better place and demonstrating something new for the environment. And I think we at Honda still, fundamentally I got hired based on that kind of vision. So I think we at Honda still share that kind of vision, and there's 3 parts to that. And this is the long-term vision. One is battery electric vehicles, such as what Atul was talking about. If we have a battery that can be small enough, inexpensive enough, high enough energy density, high enough power density. If it can work at high temperatures and work at low temperatures, and we can recharge it quickly, and it can be produced at a low enough cost. And those are all technical goals and technical targets that we can set out for our engineers to achieve. Then we can build a battery electric car that will be better than the cars that it replaces. We can refuel those cars on electricity from renewable resources, from sunlight. Another vision of that is the hydrogen electric fuel cell cars. And last week, Heather Zeichel attended a conference, and she recognized that this has a big part of the future of automobile technology. Again, hydrogen can be made from renewable resources, from sunlight and electricity. It can also be made in the near term from natural gas, of which the United States has an incredible abundance right now. It's again a zero-emission vehicle technology that can propel larger vehicles that customers might choose to drive, minivans and larger vehicles. You want to tow your boat from Los Angeles up to Lake Tahoe, and take the kids water skiing. You might need to choose that kind of power plant technology. It can also be something like cellulosic ethanol. Honda has a project now with the US Department of Energy's National Renewable Energy Lab, NREL. We're working together with NREL, and NREL has a unique technology to break apart the cellulosic part of plants, the parts that our bodies can't digest. Honda has unique technology, a type of bacteria that can eat the sugars, the xylose and glucose, eat it faster and more completely than any technology that's been shown so far. And so if we can make ethanol, which is essentially solar-powered crop, again, we can achieve that kind of long-term vision of automobiles fueled by a supply that comes from renewable energy. Now, all of those things are risky and uncertain, and there would be nothing innovative if we knew what the answer was. And so in the meantime, we still have to invest heavily in those steps of improving the internal combustion engine, improving the hybrid vehicle systems, and investing in those technologies as well in order to get us to that point in the future.
Well, I agree that the automotive industry is moving forward, and it's moving fast. The technologies are moving fast. And we in the training and education industry have to try to keep up with that. You create some training and education, and the day you're finished, there's a new thing that's come out. So we try to be nimble and be able to move with the industry, but education doesn't move at the speed of industry sometimes. And I'll give you some examples. In the high school programs, which we really need to look at, it takes some of the automotive programs, training programs that are out there are still talking about the internal combustion engine the same way we were talking about it 40 years ago. Well, we have electric drive vehicles now. We have ethanol, biodiesel, natural gas vehicles, which have been mentioned up here. Well, these are all new technologies that aren't getting exposed to some of our young people, and they need to know about these technologies and how they relate to our regular vehicles in the same way. So, one of the programs that we're doing is we're developing electric drive vehicle training to go in career and technology education programs in high schools. And I'm so excited about this because after we do several pilots, one of which will be in West Virginia, we hope to pilot this in other states to start getting this new technology into the high schools, which then can move into the community colleges and so forth. So that's starting very young. At the post-secondary level and at many institutions, we also have to retrain our trainers. And a lot of people don't think about this because a lot of our instructors and our teachers, we're going to have a huge turnover in this country. I forgot what somebody said earlier, the silver tsunami. I can tell you at our university, half of our university is going to turn over. It's like this in a lot of places. And the ones that are here, we're taught previous things. So we have to retrain our instructors for these new technologies as well. And one thing I'll follow up on is the education of the general public. I've been around these alt-fuel vehicles for over 20 years now, and I remember when we started back in the early 90s and late 80s, early 90s, mid 90s, and we were talking about the same things that we are talking about today. The difference is the technology's better today. I believe the automotive industry is more behind it today, and government's more behind it today. So I really think it's going to stick this time. But what we really need to do is get the general customer, the consumers out there, to understand this new technology. And you may say, well, yeah, we see the hybrid commercials, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I can tell you, we were just at the Career and Technology huge conference here in DC for high school, well, for K through 12 kids. There's about 500,000 people there, and their teachers. And we have one of our trainers is a cutaway Toyota Prius, which we've cut away. We've put barcodes on, and you can scan it with your iPad, and it tells you different things about the vehicle. A number of people that came by were Toyota Prius owners. And I just played a game, and I asked each one of them that came up, I said, so you own a Toyota Prius? He said, yes. I said, explain it to me. There wasn't a single person at that show that could explain it to me in a full way. My point of the thing is you know, we have to let the general public, we have to educate them as well. And there are a lot of people trying to do that across the country. And I'll give you one other example. I personally was in the market for a car, and I narrowed it down to 3 vehicles. I won't say which 3, but I eventually bought a Chevrolet Volt. And I bought it because there are different driving habits that people have, and I drive less than 30 miles a day. And I can drive on pure EV, and I'll never have to buy gasoline again in Morgantown, West Virginia, unless I go on an extended trip. Then I can go anywhere I want. But that car was perfect for me. Everywhere I drive that car, somebody comes up to me and asks me, that's one of those Chevy Volts, isn't it? I said, yes, it is. I said, do you know how it works? Why don't you tell me? My point is the education out there from the high school to the education levels and to the general public. We have to change with these technologies. And it's just as important to, in my opinion, to train the general public so they understand and will accept these vehicles. Because like he said, if they produce the cars and they don't buy them, the marketplace will determine that we won't have these vehicles.
Al, I just want to, with due respect, I'm okay if they buy the cars, but they don't understand it. I just want them to buy the cars.
I understand. I'm trying to get more people to buy the cars.
And I think that that's only going to become true if it makes sense to the wallet.
Right.
And today it doesn't make sense to the wallet. It's just a cool factor today. So.
Right. So I think we have heard a broad set of, of this opportunity, and what I'd like to do is open it up to questions. So that we have, as we said before, a microphone on the side, questions for the panelists as well as for the folks watching online. Again, if you could, before you ask your question, introduce yourself and the organization you represent, and make sure that your question ends with a question mark.
Great job to the panelists. My name's Ken Brown. I'm with Transportation Energy Partners. We're an umbrella group for the Clean Cities coalitions around the country. And my question is, in terms of federal policy, what do you see are the most important things that are needed to continue the innovation moving forward in the future?
Well, we got to get our $7,500 tax credit to be a rebate. It'd be nice if we could bump it up to $10,000 or more, but it's got to be point of sale. And then in the future, some of the stakeholders in the Southeast in particular have identified with some of the grant funding, you have to be very careful about how you use the funds, but if we could use funds to get the sales staff working at the dealerships to get an incentive, I get $100 to sell an electric car, then people are going to want to learn about electric cars and they're going to be enthusiastic about it. So those, I think, would be 2 things that would be very helpful moving forward.
I think also, in terms of like stable long-term incentives, such as Jules mentioned, those are very important. What's also important is like long-term stable regulation. Also, performance-based regulations. For instance, right now we have a $7,500 tax credit for a vehicle based on the size of its battery. But what society cares about is how much climate change emissions it reduces and how much petroleum is saved by doing it. Hybrid electric vehicles, natural gas vehicles, hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, other similar answers that can also address the problems of climate change and petroleum dependence don't have similar incentives. So if we can make performance-based regulations, such as the CAFE target saying you need to hit 54.5 miles per gallon by 2025, the auto industry can react to that. It's difficult for us to anticipate something like a specific technology incentive because A, that's challenging. It changes the direction of the engineers, and we also don't know if that's going to start, stop, go up or down, and it becomes a big challenge for us to develop technologies to address those needs.
So
I think.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Please, Mike, go ahead.
Thank you. I think on a lighter front as well, the cash for clunkers, as was stated earlier, a good many of the cars on the road are 10 years old or older. They're not very fuel efficient. The cash for clunkers was a great way to get the economy rolling and to clean up the environment as well. So something as simple as that bill by Betty Sutton was really a great thing for this country. And even though some people laughed at cash for clunkers, it really did a lot of good for us.
Yeah, I think one thing that we have tried to do in terms of federal policy is think about approaches that are performance-based. There are many, Atul included, myself included, who believe vehicle electrification is an enormous opportunity, particularly for light-duty vehicles. But again, as Ryan said, and as a lot of the other large companies are doing, there's a portfolio of vehicle technologies that companies are investing in. So, we have in this year put in place two things or proposed two policies. One, reforms of the existing EV tax credit to try and make it, one, scalable for a broad set of advanced vehicle technologies based upon performance, and two, put in place what we call a National Community Deployment Challenge, which would be a $1 billion program that really focuses on some of the challenges that Jules and Al and others were highlighting, both in terms of providing local consumer experience with new technologies, which is incredibly important for adoption even when the economics work, but solving some of the local challenges through local leadership, where a set of communities can aim for a strategy at scale for the technologies that work for them, whether that be electrification, biofuels, natural gas, or whatnot. So I do think it is a good point. One thing on this topic of a broad set of technologies, a question from the Twitterverse, and maybe this is a question for Atul, is looking at this, is how do some other technologies fare against electric vehicles? The individual, Daniel Gray, highlighted carbon sequestration drop-in renewable fuels. How do some things like drop-ins and others fare against EVs in how you look at the market going forward?
No, I think that large companies and government has a responsibility to adopt a portfolio theory in which they explore many different aspects of how to solve the problem. All of the above is what it's called today. I think that for a small company like ours, which lives and dies by its first and second product, we are very committed to lithium-ion batteries, and we have to make sure that that particular economic and wallet argument works best. The other problem with new technologies, especially the renewables that this gentleman talks about, is in automotives, as we all know here, it takes about 3 or 4 years to innovate, and then it takes about 5 years to qualify. So you're looking at an 8-year cycle from the day a company is founded to the time a technology makes it into the car. The automotive companies have an extremely high bar of quality and qualification process, and some of these new technologies that we are hearing about that's coming up in the last year or two will take another decade to get in. Lithium-ion batteries are nothing new. You're using them in your iPhones and your BlackBerries that you have here. They've been around. It's just that they have been a minuscule of what will be required in automotives. And NVIDIA's claim to fame is that we have decreased the cost by increasing the density and made it safer for it to be in cars. So I personally think that lithium-ion batteries is the only viable solution until 2025 for electrification of the cars.
Well, can I add, there are many technologies out there right now that are alternatives to foreign oil and foreign petroleum. All of these vehicles, as I discussed with my personal decision, all of these vehicles can be utilized in different manners and have different niches. I think personally, we need to use everything that we have in this country as a whole to get us off of foreign oil. But I would be remiss if I didn't say that an example of that, besides the electric drive vehicles, is natural gas vehicles. In the state of West Virginia, where I'm located, and in Pennsylvania and Kentucky, there is a vast amount, and it is a huge thing right now, of the supply of natural gas that we have in this country. And I don't see any reason why this country could not displace a ton of foreign oil with natural gas to utilize these vehicles. The technology in all of these, the different technology, the gaseous fuels, the biofuels, the electric vehicles, they're all tremendously accelerated from what they were just 10 or 15 years ago. So we have some resources in this country that I believe we should be utilizing all of them. And we're fuel neutral at our organization. I happen to have bought an electric drive vehicle, but there are other technologies out there that are extremely valuable to this country right now, and we have resources that we need to be using.
Since Al has declared his automotive affiliation, I'll do that too. And please, two of the panel members here, I drive a natural gas Honda.
Oh, so and you work for an electric drive company, so
yeah.
So what do you say?
I want my technology to get in the car before I buy the car.
There you go. There you
But I think you made an important point. We have to use whatever it takes to make this thing real. And I think that two of the things that we have the best, we are still the largest economy in the world, and we are still the best intellectual property machine in the world. You look at national labs like Argonne, Brookhaven, Sandia, Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. These are absolutely the premier institutions in the world. Our PhD programs, graduate study programs are bar none the absolute best. That's why people like me travel 10,000 miles and migrate to these countries, because of the opportunity for education. I think that I want to close with two sort of most important concerns on my head. Obviously, there's a lot of other things that we talked about, but two concerns. One is R&D spending. It absolutely cannot go down. We're not talking about billions of dollars. We are not talking about picking winners. We're just talking about calculated, specific investments like the ARPA vehicle. But the second more important one, I think, is intellectual property protection. We have thousands of fighter pilots, thousands of nuclear missiles guarding our homeland property, guarding our continent, guarding our country. Well, we don't have much of those defenses for our intellectual property. And we really need to think about this for the next century, because the next century battles are not going to be fought on land, sea, and air. They're going to be fought on the computers and in intellectual property, in the patents. China is already filing more patents than US. We cannot afford for our national labs to license our valuable taxpayer-paid intellectual property to foreign countries, to our competitors, like Germany, South Korea, China. We have to protect our intellectual property, and that's going to be a very important issue for the next decade, for us to make sure that we win and create the jobs that we need to create in this country.
I want to touch on this point of a portfolio of potential technologies and what that means at a local level. And Jules, I want to see if you could talk about how you think about that challenge.
Well, I'll lead off that thought with quoting our Clean Cities Atlanta Executive Director, Don Francis. He always tells people that come out to our events that we're going to win this fight with silver buckshot, not with silver bullets, or a silver bullet rather. But yeah, how we're moving forward in the Atlanta area is really just trying to communicate with all the local stakeholders, understand what's keeping them from being successful, understand what they need to become successful, and then really how I function, how Clean Cities has been functioning is just as a broker of information to try to keep people moving forward and to keep the technology in the Metro Atlanta area. Mayor Reed always says that we want to keep the smart we get all these smart people that come to Atlanta to go to college. We want to keep them there when they're done. So unless we can encourage manufacturing to come to the Atlanta area, we're not going to be able to do that as much as we'd like. So anyone who wants to come, any manufacturing company, wants to come to the Atlanta area, we'd love it.
Great. On this topic, so Ryan, I was wondering if you had thoughts on, Honda's looking at building, I talked about it in the introduction for you, Honda's looking at building a new hybrid vehicle in Ohio. How does Honda, a company based elsewhere, think about operations in the United States, and how are some of the companies like NVIDIA and others influencing decisions that Honda might make on where to locate production and where to locate R&D?
That's a fantastic question. I think it's important to know, like, 88% of the cars that Honda sells in the United States are manufactured in the United States. And we have auto plants all throughout the United States. And what is key to the decisions to siting plants here are kind of what we've discussed about before, is stable long-term policy. Things aren't going to change too terribly quickly. Low cost, access to low cost and stable electricity. And we also have opportunity here in the United States with the natural gas resources that are here. I think we'll see over the next couple of years some reindustrialization of the United States through the use of natural gas. And that'll help with plastics, glass, steel manufacturing, being able to get access to lower cost raw materials for manufacturing cars. Now, as far as new technologies such as batteries and whatnot, that's beginning now. So the Acura ILX is being built in our Greensburg, Indiana plant. Today, the battery is coming from Japan. But that's okay. That's how things start. Honda has a history of building where we sell, and that history will move forward. So as the United States builds its capability and resources, that'll be the access to those resources is what we want to see.
Great. And one last question for Mike, maybe, and others may want to comment on this as well. I mean, if you think about a lot of modern manufacturing process started with Ford, beginning of the last century, and we're seeing a broad set of new technologies. Ford's done a lot to think about how to put different drivetrains into different kinds of vehicles on a single assembly line. How should we think about all the innovation that we've been talking about, the broad set of technologies impacting what we think of as auto manufacturing and its impact on jobs in the United States?
Well, it's interesting. A lot of the technologies that Toyota employs came from Henry Ford. Henry Ford was a big proponent of making your own parts in-house, keeping things in-house so you can control the quality. And when we've gotten away from that, and I'd like to say due to the accountants and bookkeepers, my wife happens to be an accountant, so I can't say that. But I think that's a lot to do with it. It seems like the final cost always comes down. But I think we've got to get back to that, making things in-house, keeping things here in America, making the products here in America. And Henry Ford did something else too that was pretty revolutionary back in the day. He started a $5 workday. And back then, $5 was a lot of money. People told me he was out of his mind. It was probably twice what other people were being paid. But he paid his employees a fair wage for one simple reason, so they could afford the product they were making. And we can sit up here and talk about selling cars, talk about electric cars, talk about EcoBoost engines or whatever. If people can't afford to buy them, they're not going to buy them. And that's one of the biggest things we have to look at is the economy. And that's why I think the government can help somewhat as far as with the cash for clunkers or with some kind of tax incentives to buy more fuel-efficient vehicles, because the bottom line is this: we all breathe the same air, we all live in the same world. We've got to protect the environment first and foremost. And the biggest way to do that, we have to get off of our dependency on foreign oil. And we can do that, ladies and gentlemen, in this country. We have the wherewithal to do it. And to me, that should be the next big war.
Thanks.
I have to recognize Tesla's leadership. They're the only vehicle manufacturer I know of that has the word awesome in their mission statement. They want to make electric vehicles awesome. I think that's very powerful, and it's reflective in their leadership. They make pretty incredible cars. They're just a young car company, but I think that kind of visionary leadership is something that will help, move us forward faster. Like I think it was the Johnson Controls person who said we need to fail fast to keep moving. I get it, they're expensive today, but let's continue to move forward and fail fast and get these vehicles out there.
I happen to be a very big
I wanna
admirer of Nikola Tesla himself, a brilliant man who never got his due. An absolutely brilliant man, Nikola Tesla. However, a Tesla, I believe, goes for over $100,000. The average American just can't afford that kind of car. I agree with what you're saying, but we have to make it efficient for an Americans to be able to afford it and buy it.
Definitely. Well, the base Model S is $57,400 in Georgia with our tax credits plus the federal. That takes it down to $47,500. That's comparable to most SUVs, and Americans drive those.
Mike, that was my punchline, which is we want to make them awesome but affordable. That's really key.
Yeah.
But I think that if you go back to the fundamental where we see this market going, by 2025, if you have 10% of the cars on the road electric driven, you're talking about creating 7 million jobs in the US just based on battery manufacturing and the associated supply chain. That's a really powerful jobs, climate, and an economic argument, which we have to sort of win this. There is no other options.
So thank you all for coming. I constantly look for signposts for the future, and earlier this month there was one of the most incredible signposts for the future. The 24 Hours of Le Mans, the most rigorous automobile race on the planet, was won by a hybrid car.
Great. Thanks, everyone. I think we will close the panel there. I think this is, thank you to the panelists. I think really highlighting that not only have we made a lot of progress in the last couple of years, seeing the opportunity with the resurgence in the American auto industry, but the promise of new technologies, both in terms of addressing the internal combustion engine as well as the breadth of advanced and alternative fuel technologies, offers an enormous opportunity for us to grab hold of the leadership of global auto manufacturing because of its central place in really in our ability to maintain economic growth, to drive the strength in the manufacturing sector, and to continue driving innovation going forward. So thank you all for coming, and thank you again to the panelists.
Thanks, Jason and Tim. I do want to, we want to close out with a very special guest, Jay Williams. Jay just joined us here at the White House to serve as a liaison to state and local communities. And prior to that, Jay was the executive director of the Office of Recovery for Auto Communities and Workers. Before he joined the administration, Jay was the mayor of Youngstown, so he knows a thing or two about auto communities and recovery. Jay Williams, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks for the introduction, Rohan. I will be very brief. I understand that there are two precarious positions to speak from. One is being the speaker just prior to lunch, and the second one is being the speaker just prior to everyone getting to go home. So the fact that I'm occupying that second position, I will be brief, but I certainly appreciate the opportunity just to come for a very few minutes to express how excited I am about the conversation that's going on and how important that conversation is to manufacturing communities. As Rohan talked about, I was the mayor of the city of Youngstown, Ohio, till about a year ago. I was in my 6th year, in my second term, when I stepped down to accept an appointment to run the auto recovery office. And having been in Youngstown my entire life, and as a kid remembering the steel mills and the collapse of those steel mills in the 70s, what that did in terms of devastation economically, emotionally, psychologically, and culturally to a city like Youngstown. And then to see that replicated when the auto industry went through its very difficult restructuring to cities across the country, certainly in Ohio and Michigan and Indiana and you name it, not just the auto cities themselves, but the manufacturing, the supplier communities. So to have this discussion in terms of the recreation of jobs and bringing manufacturing back to those communities is exceptionally important, and I'm personally and professionally excited about it. And we've heard the story that when the president took office, the automotive industry in this country was on life support, and certainly particularly acute with GM and Chrysler. The president made that decision to invest, and it's been called a bailout, but it was an investment in the American worker, an investment in the American manufacturing, because had that investment not been made, had that calculated decision not been accomplished, while it was directly affecting GM and Chrysler, it is inarguable that Ford would have been irreparably harmed, because as you all know, there's an interconnected network of suppliers. And the credible economists talk about the loss of over 1 million jobs had GM and Chrysler been allowed to fail or go bankrupt without government intervention, as some suggested, because again, Ford would have been harmed, and that would have harmed Toyota, and it would have harmed Honda and all the other suppliers and original manufacturers here in this country. But the president did make that decision. That decision has paid off. We are making progress. As a matter of fact, GM last year, in its 100-year existence as a corporation, reported its most profitable year. Chrysler reported its most profitable quarter in over 2 decades. We have seen the American automotive industry add over 230,000 jobs in the past 2 years. We have seen manufacturing add over 495,000 jobs since 2010. That is the strongest growth in manufacturing in well over a decade. And that is directly relevant to these communities, because these communities were the communities that decades ago built the infrastructure of this country. They produced the infrastructure, the steel that helped win the world wars, that made this the superpower that it is today. But those communities fell on hard times. So when we talk about remanufacturing of America, it is really happening in our cities, in our communities, many of those communities that were written off. This economy is recovering. It's far too slow. The president has made that very clear, that he is nowhere near satisfied with the rate of recovery. But the fact that there have been over 4.2 million jobs created in the past 27 consecutive months, after 25 months of job loss, I think speaks to the commitment of this administration. I've had the opportunity over the past several months, so I served as mayor of Youngstown, and then for the past 10 months, I was director of the Auto Recovery Office, and I had an opportunity to travel across the country to communities, many of which I was very familiar with in terms of their recovery efforts. The president created that office because he understood that while the recovery and the restructuring of the industry itself was happening and was necessary and important, these communities had a long, tedious road to recovery. So he wanted to make sure that there was a coordinated federal response to the restructuring of this industry. There was not a coordinated federal response to the collapse of the steel industry decades ago, and as a result, many communities like Youngstown have just now found ourselves in recovery mode. But as a direct result of the policies and the position of this administration, we're seeing many of these automotive communities on a faster road to recovery. That's not to say that there isn't pain out there, because there is, but my direct experience with these local officials, I've been extremely impressed by the collaboration of stakeholders coming together, whether it's groups like the Suppliers Partnership for the Environment or the Automotive Communities Partnership. They are bringing together stakeholders from the public sector, from the private sector, from the philanthropic community, to make sure that these communities are supported as they move toward their road to recovery. And the commitment to this sector shouldn't be a surprise, and I can tell you that it was most evident to me earlier this year when I went to the Detroit Auto Show. I was literally like a kid in a candy store, and it was hard to convince my wife that I was going to the auto show and I was working, and I was doing serious work, and not just being, again, enamored by the products that have been put forth, certainly by the big 3 automakers, but by all of the automakers who have invested here, those foreign companies who have been here for a number of years. But it's clear that the big 3 are making world-class automobiles that are in demand by the world. They are making automobiles that are technologically advanced, that are fuel efficient, and they're able to compete in any platform in any country. So it was extremely gratifying just to literally be able to see and hear and see the excitement and the buzz, particularly around the Ford Focus, the Ford Fusion. It was exciting to see the unveiling and just to hear the excitement that people have about that, and the fact that these automobiles have more advanced technology than many American homes, and really have more technology than those brave pioneers who traversed space a decade or 2 or 3 decades ago. More technology in our automobiles than we had in our early space flights. So I'm pleased to be able to continue to engage local communities on the issues that are important to them. This administration has laid the foundation for recovery. We are seeing that recovery. Despite the headwinds that are out there, we are seeing recovery. There are bright spots in this economy that will continue to push forward, but we are nowhere near satisfied. And that's why it's important that we continue to have a partnership with groups, with individuals such as yourself, to make sure that the policies that the president is pushing and pushing and pushing and putting forward remain, that we don't lose any ground, because it's far too critical for the well-being of these communities. It was President Kennedy who said we will neglect our cities at our peril, because when we neglect the nation's cities, we neglect our nation. So the president has taken that up. I am pleased to just be a very, very small part of it in my role. And again, coming from a place like Youngstown, Ohio, that's very similar to Flint, very similar to Pontiac. You name the city that was manufactured something, and I can tell you that it's a story that relates very deeply to me on a personal and a professional level. The solutions aren't easy, you know that. The conversations are necessary, but I am thoroughly convinced that because of the conversations, because of the level of engagement, because of the talent that we have in this room and certainly within this administration working together, that we are putting a glide path forward, that these communities will be much better off. And while in Youngstown, I'm pleased to say that Youngstown is now, of all the lists we've been on, we are now on the list of leading the economic recovery of Rust Belt communities, but it's a direct result of the commitment that this president and this administration has shown to those communities. And I'm hopeful that the communities that are going through recovery now don't have to follow that 25-year path that Youngstown had to follow before we finally figured out, steel is not going to define us like it did. Manufacturing is important, diverse manufacturing is important, but we have to be a player in this global economy. So that being the case, the investments that we're seeing in these communities from the big three, from Honda, from the suppliers, from Toyota, you name it, it is really redefining these communities, and I'm pleased to be able to connect that. So again, thank you for your time, thank you for your talent, and we very much look forward to your continued support. As the president moves these things forward, we are going to see how important it is to these, and I call them second or third tier cities, not because they're less important, but just because of their size, how important a role they play in the ongoing economic recovery of this nation. So thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, everybody, and that concludes our event.